were looking at this document, one of the biggest things was the construction of it. There seems to now be a section that says code of conduct in here, but I'm trying to understand, not understand, I already know. We have a code of conduct document. I don't understand why we're putting all of that code of conduct in here. And then there's an item on here that says, specifically, the one that talks about our city manager becoming the sergeant at arms. I think that would take the role in a whole different direction, because these are council meetings. These are not city manager meetings. So I think that's not appropriate for it to be in here. The part that talks about the statement that says citizens' appearances. Right now, I thought we said we only want the address. The name and city of residence. But in here, it actually says address. So that might have been just a correction that needs to be made. But there was some changes to the document in the structure that was a little different than our last rules and procedures that were done in January. Because when you look at the actual manager's report on this particular agenda item, it said the last time it was updated was November 7th, 2023, but it actually was done January 3rd, 2023, so unless I missed it, and there was one in November of 2023. So that, I don't know if there was just a mix-up there. I know I said a lot. Hang tight for a minute. I got a couple more items. There are no page numbers, and I think I'd ask for those. Adding those page numbers in so that we can make sure we know the page numbers. They did do a good job in adding the table of contents. But I stand by my other thought process, though, that we do not need a code of conduct in this particular document. It should be in the code of conduct. And that part that talks about the city manager.
So that title, code of conduct, we can retitle it to something else. It's just a term we carry. We can retitle that code. We can retitle that to something else, because it's really just the code of conduct as it relates to this specific, these rules of procedure. So it can be titled something else. We don't have to stand by that. If that's confusing. And you should have received a copy that had the page numbers on it. Should have had. Yeah.
This copy here has it.
Correct.
But the one we had online
Does not have, you're correct.
It may have been a copy, because if these were, if this was tracked and redlined and commented on, it probably won't show up from a Word document, but obviously there are page numbers if they had a table of contents. So my assumption was that there was page numbers, because these page numbers looked blue. So my assumption is this is from the tracking.
It's not on the one online. The one we were looking at is the reason why I was saying that. But it's okay. If we got them, we got them. That's awesome. But I still believe that, it's just my opinion. There's a lot of statements in their code of conduct that actually should be in our code of conduct. That I feel like we're adding it in two different places.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Were you done, Ms. Park? I was going to say the code of conduct has always been part of this document. I'm looking at several copies here, and the code of conduct, I don't know where else it would be. I can't remember. But I think it's always been a part of this document, has it not?
We have always referred to it in this document. That code of conduct term in here has been carried over in this document. It's not a new term to this document. And then we have a standards of conduct, which is for officials, which is in chapter 1 of the Code of Ordinances under our ethics code.
Right. And I think since this is uniquely toward us, I don't remember us never having it as part of this city council rule and procedures. I think every time that we've approved it, and I could be absolutely wrong, but I don't, and I'm looking at two drafts now, I always see the code of conduct in there. So that part, but to the, I've looked through my red line. I have the red line one with me, and I'm looking at this one online. So I'm ready to vote at any time that the council is ready, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Chisholm?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to also piggyback on the code of conduct because if you read points A1 through 6, they more so align our behavior in our meetings, not necessarily a code of conduct in its totality of the role as a city council member, but how we will interact and engage with one another in this meeting, which is why I think it's more befitting for this city council rules and procedures, because under the citizens appearance piece, we also are adding to outline how citizens will also communicate with residents, to the council when they're at the podium. And so I think in regards to the comment about the city manager being the sergeant at arms, because I have seen that in other cities, that's not anything new, but I think that the real question, and to kind of piggyback on the resident as well that spoke, is who will enforce to ensure that when a resident comes forward and a city council member's name is mentioned, or things are mentioned that will be defaming to them or in the role, who is to correct that? Because that, is that the city manager? Is that the mayor? Is that the city secretary? Because then that is who your sergeant at arms is at that time. That's that person correcting the person that's stepping outside of this policy.
And I would, Dr. Marks, you have a question pertaining to her. I was going to add something along that same vein to our city attorney about noting that in terms of who serves in that particular role, because I think that is a question that needs to be answered before we vote on this item, so that we can have an understanding to that. I mean, Councilmember Chisholm, you've mentioned seeing sergeant at arms in other cities, or do you recall who served in that particular role?
I'll be honest with you. So like with the city of Dallas, it's the mayor, it's the city manager. However, when I've watched their meetings, the city secretary cuts in and corrects residents, and they're also the one. So usually they give the rules before you speak. I've spent a few times speaking at the commissioner's court, and in that perspective, the sheriff who's there on duty comes and gives the rules, and then the city secretary, the commissioner's secretary, is the one that nudges when you come outside of the agenda. It's just different for every city, but ideally, it's usually from the city secretary's seat point of view that I typically see that happening. Rarely is it like, I guess, the city manager, and then also whoever we have from a law enforcement perspective.
So normally it would be the presiding officer. So if you're presiding and something happens, someone speaks and says something, you tell them to stop whatever it is they're doing, and they refuse to, and then it gets to the point where they may have to be removed from the meeting. That's when you would go to the sergeant at arms, whether it's the city manager sitting next to you, and say, we need to have this person removed from the meeting. Usually take a recess and then proceed. So it's whoever you're turning to make sure these rules are being enforced.
Thank you. Councilmember Chisholm, does that kind of speak to your question?
Yes, ma'am. So what I hear you saying is that it should be amended to have you as the presiding officer as the sergeant at arms?
It has her as a presiding officer, and then as a presiding officer, she turns to the sergeant at arms for the enforcement portion of this.
Okay.
This is the way we have it, is the way it was here in the last draft and this draft.
Gotcha.
It's remained the same.
And since she can't directly, or as our charter says, we don't
Give
direct
directives.
staff, she
Yes, it
directs
has
the
to
city
be him.
manager, who then directs
Correct,
staff.
And that
Gotcha.
has happened in the past, when we've
Gotcha.
had to have individuals removed, or there were instances, it has to go through the city manager, and the city manager has to give the directives.
Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Marks?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was sitting here thinking about one of the sessions that I believe Councilwoman Parker and I, maybe, I might have been Raphael, one of them, but we attended a session at one of the conferences, and it dealt with this very same thing. However, we can do whatever we're deciding to do, but I want to make sure that we're within the legal ramifications, because there's a legal side to that as well. So, Mr. Graffita, can you enlighten us as to what that looks like? Are you familiar with that? Because they went through a lot of different scenarios as to what you can say safely and what you cannot say. Are you familiar with that?
As far as First Amendment rights and people's rights at
Yes,
a council meeting?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely. And
yes.
I mean, that is obviously, and that's fluid too, and that changes. So that is obviously why, if there's an issue and he turns to the sergeant at arms, there would be a recess or a discussion. If like, for instance, if you're asking for someone to be removed from the meeting, we need to make a decision. Can we remove someone from the meeting? Is it a violation of their First Amendment rights? Those types of things. Is that what you're referring to?
But then I guess people need to understand what that looks like, because there was, sometimes we might think it's offensive, but according to the law,
Correct.
it's
It may
not.
not be offensive,
And
exactly.
Exactly. So I think that needs to be clarified as well. So I don't know if that's,
I don't think you can
I
outline.
don't know.
Yeah, but I don't think we can take our rules and procedures and outline
All
possibly
of
every
those, yeah.
scenario.
Yeah.
That, okay, what's offensive?
Okay,
what-
so you will
what's-
call it at that
Yeah,
time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why he's
It's-
saying do the
yeah.
recess and then
Yeah.
stop, take a break, and then be advised on what it is. Just kind of to give us a moment to assess what's actually happening, so that
Right.
we don't make a split-second
Right.
decision. And like you said, it may violate, and it,
Right.
like you said, what may be
Right.
offensive may still not be
right,
an issue.
exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
Councilmember Chisholm.
I-
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Marks, please continue. I'm sorry,
Is
she
it
she
on
was
that
not
same-
finished.
Is it on that same thing? Because I had something else. Is
It's
it-
on the same.
Okay, you can go.
Oh, wait, you're right. Thank you, I appreciate it. I just wanted to also say that in my research, also, this is also something, to give you an example, the city of Dallas actually has currently in place. So when we talk about legal ramifications, in the city of Dallas, you cannot walk up to the podium and actually address a council member by name. City Manager, Godfrey, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you cannot, slanderously, talk about them specifically as a person. You must address the mayor. You can talk by place, or, district, if there's an issue within that district, but you cannot say that council member's name. That is, and many of these that, are listed are also, if you need an example, you can find them in this, the city of Dallas under their secretary, rules and procedures for meetings.
Thank you. Dr. Marks?
I want to go back to Mr. Graffito, if you would assist me in this area, when it talks about motions. How did that get changed to what, I see were you the one that included that?
Which section?
Parliamentary.
B motions?
Yes.
Yes, so this language, with motions, that was a language that we discussed, at our, summer retreat,
Okay,
and some examples that we would use and actually place in here, so we have the procedures for motions and then examples of those motions. So that's where that language came from. So we actually have a reference of, and the most common motions that we use. We also have the discussion, as you recall, it said in here, Robert's Rules of Order will determine the precedent of motions in the general conduct and composition of meetings, except as otherwise provided herein or by state law. And the discussion at that time, or consensus was, let's remove the reference to Robert's Rules of Order because that's misleading, because we don't follow Robert's Rules of Order.
oh,
The section in there about Robert's Rules of Order will determine the precedence of motions. We had a discussion at the summer retreat, and the consensus was to go ahead and remove that, and then go ahead and place in here our own motions and what those motions would be.
I guess well, let me back up and say this. I missed that meeting because I think I had to leave early or
Correct.
something and go back to work. But what my wondering is that what we're putting in is what you did. Does that make sense?
I don't know what you mean by that. I'm hoping you're not. What do you mean by that? Are you insinuating that I'm changing this because of something that I did in the past?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm not insinuating anything. What I'm saying is, what we put in is that, okay, let's go to motions, right? it says that
I didn't put any, this is your decision, this is the council's decision on what they want in here, not my decision. So
Right,
y'all
right.
asked
No,
for
I
me to
just-
take this out, so that's why it was taken out. It had nothing to do with me taking it out.
okay. Well,
I wanna be-
whomever took it out, this is just a discussion, so calm down, it'll be okay. My question is, when we're talking about motions, it says a council member who wishes to make a motion, but anyway, it says that any council member can, make that motion. And of course, that's what we did at this last debacle that we had. Now now we're putting it in there, and to me, it just seems like we're going back and trying, and
We'll have that discussion
Does it-
with your council members, because they're the ones that the consensus was to take that provision reference.
Okay.
We can put it back in, if that's what it is. I'm just following what the consensus is.
no,
at that-
and
at
that's
that
fine,
retreat,
because
that's
I
all.
wasn't at that,
Correct.
meeting, because I had to leave and go back to work or whatever, so I
Okay.
missed that whole conversation, so that's why I'm bringing it up. That was the only reason, so.
Dr. Marks, does that conclude your comments?
That
No
concludes
questions?
my comments, but I want to know, so is that what it's going to be?
That was what the council decided at the retreat, Dr. Marks.
Okay,
So
okay.
we had a lengthy discussion about how to handle those things moving forward. It's not about trying to go back and change anything that happened in the past, but it's trying to help us to be able to handle those better moving forward into the future. So it was what the council decided at the meeting, and we discussed it, different scenarios, and the procedure that we would use to handle it at the time.
We also discussed it at the last meeting,
And we discussed it at the last meeting.
so
Well, thank you.
Okay, council, there is a motion on the floor. I believe Councilmember Chism and then, Mayor Pro Tem Hughes, is that correct? Can you restate your motion, please?
Mayor, I move that we approve as presented.
Thank you. Council, there's been a motion made, and properly second to approve as presented. We will go by and do a hand vote so we can make sure we get a proper, count on the vote, and then we have one more item for discussion.
Mayor Rachel L. Proctor,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Letitia Hughes, Councilmember Perrette Parker, Councilmember Nicole Raphael,
Yes.
Councilmember Andre Byrd,
Yes.
Councilmember Dinah Marks,
No.
Councilmember Crystal Chisholm.
Yes.
Thank you, council. That motion passes 5-2. Next, we'll have our final item on the agenda.
Last, we have discussion of the rental ordinance as it relates to absentee landlords in Desoto. The accompanying presentation was provided to the City Council on January 3rd, 2025. Making the presentation is Chief Joe Costa, Desoto Police Department.